Hi. Thank you for attending today's reading. Let's begin. I witnessed a relationship between student and teacher in high school. Saw someone I remembered from high school as a recommended friend on Facebook. She seems happy. Is engaged to be married. Has a kid and a job that she seems to really enjoy, judging by her available to see posts. Seeing her face and hearing her name, it reminded me of an incident from high school that she was part of. Something that still makes me feel uncomfortable even now. In case she has chosen to leave this stuff in the past, I won't use her real name. Let's call her Amy. We were 14/15 and attended a Catholic high school, which meant morning assemblies every day. My friends and I started ditching them since they were about very mundane shit that we already knew. Brush your vegetables and eat your teeth, kinda thing. We would initially stay in toilets and chat. But as ditching became more popular, they had staff patrolling the school ground and would take those they caught to assembly, or if it had finished, detention. This probably didn't have the effect they intended. It became more fun to sneak around without being caught. We jokingly made up platoons, where groups would assign one person to lead their given platoon. If you let someone get caught, it was seen as disgraceful, which is exactly what I did. I was with 3 guys. Went out the room and around the corner to check if the coast is clear. Came back in to find my platoon being lectured by a teacher as I quietly made my way back out while his back was turned. Snuck into an empty classroom, where I thought I was safe, only to then hear footsteps coming up the hall. I assumed my platoon had ratted me out and hid in a school closet. It had a small window on the door. I then watched Amy and a teacher come into the classroom, holding hands. Didn't even cross my mind that this was suspect. I feared being caught, but my tension soon became fear as I watched what followed. First was the teacher walking up to the door, making sure no one was out there while Amy sat on the table smiling. Next came some quiet whispering to each other. I could only guess what they were saying. But then, they kissed. Passionately with tongues and the teacher grabbing her undeveloped breast. Ugh. Even as a young teen, when even so much as reading the word boob gives you a boner. My dick seemed to understand this wasn't the time for that. I had stopped trying to duck behind the door and instead watched on in utter disbelief. Kinda like a car crash. This went on for an uncomfortable amount of time, until footsteps were heard coming up the hall. The place echoed. The star-crossed lovers ripped themselves off of each other. The teacher started to adjust his clothes and wiped away any lipstick while Amy scurried towards the closet. She moved so quickly, rushing into the closet and doing that thing cartoons do where they starfish spread themselves against the door before looking up and noticing me staring back at her. Her face said it all. To this day, one of the most uncomfortable situations I can think of. We came out of the closet once we heard the voices outside get further away. We didn't say anything until I reached for the door. He's a great guy. Quote. What? H is better than any of you assholes. Quote. Oh. Okay. I didn't. Amy then went on to lecture me why she was lucky to be in a relationship with such an accomplished man. That all guys her age here were immature and judged girls by the size of their breast than what kind of person they were. The forbidden factor makes it better, is something that in retrospect makes me throw up a little. She then sealed the deal with, if you tell anyone about us, I will tell about you. Quote. Go ahead. Do it. What? Quote. I didn't care about the platoon bullshit anymore. I knew this was much more serious, important. I don't really care. This is way more important." Quote. Amy then shrieked back about how all of us boys ruin everything and started to cry. I felt awful. So I tried my best to calm her down with frantic apologies and small talk. Said small talk actually became quite enlightening. Without making this story another 5,000 words long, I'll sum up that our conversation was about if she truly loved him and vice versa. How he'd pushed for sex and pictures of her naked. Bleck. I'd promised not to say anything and left the rest up to her. From our conversation, I had no reason to believe her stance would change anytime soon. 2 months later, I would pass that same classroom on my way to get lunch. I was puzzled to see the door broken off and a policewoman stood outside the room. Teachers were trying unsuccessfully to get onlookers to move along and some have said onlooking. Students taking out their phones for pictures. It was then that the pedo teacher from before emerged from the classroom, accompanied by a policeman. The local newspaper would later confirm my suspicion that this teacher was in fact arrested for pedophilia. But it was after Amy went to the police about it, with proof. I have no idea if my talk influenced that decision. Feels a bit egotistical to say that our conversation made her think to do this. But I'm glad she did and she seems happy with someone else 8 years later. The school is still running and is considered the best where I live. But it's still awful. There has been 2 separate cases of student and teacher relationships since then that have had the police involved. End of story. Next story. Yesterday I was mistaken for advertising. It seemed wonderful for a moment. I'm very large. Technically I'm a giant. I'm about 230 centimeters, 7 feet 6 inches tall and mass about 220 kilos, 485 pounds. Gigantism due to pituitary hyperplasia, if anyone cares. I'm pretty normally proportioned. Just really big. Naturally I have to make my own clothes. The good thing about that is I can make the clothes I want instead of the clothes I could find on a rack somewhere if I were normal sized. So I've made myself some things. Especially coats. That have been out of style for a while. Just because I like the way they look or the way they feel. Today I was riding an elevator while wearing a greatcoat over a frock coat. The patterns were from 1820s and 1880s respectively. One of the tiniest adult women I've ever seen in my life got on between floors. Her eyes are about the same height as my belt buckle. My wrists are thicker than her thighs. I'm pretty sure the waistband of her skirt would be too small for my arm. Obviously I'm not going to say one word about someone else's size. But I'm still amazed. She immediately came over to lean on me. I was stunned. All kinds of stuff was going through my head about how vulnerable she was and how trusting she was. And what the hell did this behavior mean, and holy crap, her whole neck would fit inside one of my hands and she looks so fragile that she might break just by accident if I move carelessly. And had she just heard something about me being a nice guy, and was she coming on to me, and why would she? And then I took a breath. Which she felt because she was leaning on me. She yelped, whirled around, jumped back, goggled upward, and spluttered for a few seconds. I realized she hadn't processed my bulk as a human presence. In her mind I had been some kind of advertising display for a steampunk clothing outlet or something. Something safe. However bizarre it would have been for her to actually extend the kind of trust I thought she had. And share the tiny intimacy of her touch with a stranger. I was so disappointed that it hurt, bordering on serious hurt, to realize that it had only been done by mistake. I smiled the calmest, friendliest smile I could muster and said, "Hello." End of story. That is all for today. If you want to support my automated channel, feel free to drop a like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.